gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to our last edition of Political Smackdown prior to Christmas 2024. We have most of our regular crew here, and our semi-regular crew, Roger Harris, joins us, while Betsy, I believe, is with grandchildren before Christmas.
She is. It's always a pleasure.
Glad to have you with us, Roger. Well, we had one good big piece of local news this week, and we're going to start Political Smackdown talking about that. On December the 9th, the Cleveland County Schools Board of Education met for its organizational meeting, which of course is the first meeting of the new board that was elected in November, along with those who remained and were re-elected. So they elected a board chair and a vice chair, which is the first order of business and is conducted in this case by the superintendent and then turned over to the new chairman. And so how did the vote for the chair and the vice chair come out? And was it unanimous, split? What was going on? Wes, you want to get us started?
Yeah, it was about as close as it could possibly be. 5-4 for both votes. Mr. Shores and Mr. Ledford were both nominated for chair. Mr. Shores was elected. And then Mr. Bridges and Mr. Blanton were nominated for vice chair, and Mr. Bridges was elected.
All right, comments about that? Any comments, Wes, Roger?
Well, the board is all Republican, but there's clearly two factions and have been for a long time. And that sort of explains the division in the vote. You know, it's not, there is not unanimity on that board. Maybe there will be, I hope so one day. But right now there's two factions. One faction clearly has, Mr. Blanton has a central figure, and then the other faction are those that aren't in the first faction. And it was evident when they were electing officers to the board.
But to that, if I may, every other vote that was had was unanimous.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I wish they do. They need to start the clock on the members when they start getting member comments, because some of those guys, they just kind of go on and on and on and really don't give anything of that you need. I mean, if you make a comment, you make comments about what you've done as far as a visit you made to the schools that day, something like that. But some of these guys make campaign speeches, Mike, just go on forever. Election's over. Let's move on.
Well, I think
but the next election has already started.
I think at an organizational meeting, you give a little bit of room for people to make comments, Mr. Dedman. But at any rate, of course, I listened to some of these speeches on the floor of the House this week. They were fairly long, too.
Yes, they are.
But so we do know we did have the split votes, 5-4. Mr. Shores became the chairman. And let's at least talk about the 5. I don't think we've seen it anywhere. Let's see if I can remember the 5. Mr. Shores voted for himself. Mr. Humphreys voted for him. And Sperling voted.
Gloria Sherman and Aaron Bridges.
Gloria Sherman and Gloria Sherman. So Gloria was the only one of the 3 newly elected members that voted for an existing member that was reelected.
Yes.
The other 3 joined. Other 2 joined with Mr. Blanton and Mr. Grigg and voted for Mr. Ledford. So that's the division, at least on that one or 2 subjects of chair and vice chair.
I'm excited to see what Gloria Sherman is going to bring to the board. There is tremendous potential in that woman. She has an extensive educational background, and not only was she a teacher and a principal, but she was one of those teachers and principals that were respected by all the other principals in the system. You know, she was the one that principals would call for advice. Just a sharp lady, the only woman on the otherwise all-male board, and a new member to the board that does not have any allegiances to any of the factions coming in. It's going to be interesting to see the dynamic that Mrs. Sherman brings to that board, and I think it's going to be positive.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, somebody's been around let's face it, all the other 9, she has got the most experience. Mm-hmm. I don't care anybody says they've been on the board or whatnot, but when you've been in the classroom and in administration, you see it all, and you learn the hard way, don't you,
Yeah,
Roger?
You surely do.
So I think she'll be a great asset to us.
Well, gentlemen, we'll move on to the next part of this, still talking about the school board meeting. The new chairman, in the remarks toward the end of the meeting by the chairman, Joel Shores, he announced that he was going to combine some committees. After Robert Queen became the chairman 4 years ago, they created a committee system, not altogether, Wes, unlike the community college system.
Correct.
And so the committees meet between the monthly school board meetings, and if a recommendation for action comes from a committee, it does not require a second. If I understand it correctly, it gets voted on. There is discussion, and I think they generally have had 3 members on committees, and they've served on more than one. But I think he's combining them to where there'll only be 3 committees this time, and everybody will serve on one of them, I guess, is what it is. But Roger,
And the chairman's an ex officio on
of all of them.
Yep.
And the chairman made a point that as ex officio, he wouldn't try to run the meeting.
That's right.
But Roger, you're a little more familiar with school boards than the rest of us. What do you think about the committee system and then the change in it to maybe simplify it a little bit?
Well, in the last 4 years, as you say, the board has done much of its work by committee. You know, that's the way community college does. That's the way every Baptist church I know of does. You've got committees, and a lot of work is done there. It does what the change did in the last 4 years is reduce the number of school board meetings from 2 a month to 1 a month, with the other part being done by committee. And that has some efficiency to it, but either intentionally or unintentionally, it also means that a lot of the public work is done in the dark. Those committee meetings are open to the public, but the public's not going to come to a committee meeting, and they're certainly not going to be broadcast. So a lot of the public's business is being kind of done in the shadows a little bit. The new chairman said he was going to combine the policy and education committee. That makes a lot of sense. Safety and operations, those blend very nicely. And then a finance and personnel committee, which is always important in the school system, where the school system is a labor-intensive business. And so personnel is just always an important part. I know that the chairman said at one point, he said, I hope this board can start working together, which sort of implies that the board has not been working together. And I did think was interesting is after he did that, he spent a long time explaining the meaning of the word decorum and talked about that. So I think the chairman is trying to turn the page and bring some sunshine to the Board of Education.
And he also actually read from, I think, Robert's rules, what the role of the
What
chair
the role of the chairman is, yep. Yeah, there was
And
one.
they're relatively simple.
Yeah, they are.
Andy, what are your thoughts on the committee combinments and anything else they did or talked about?
Well, I've always been a little bit in favor of some of these committees where you've got some people can take some time and maybe spend more than you can actually in the actual meeting itself monthly. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it makes the other ones that are not on that committee, there might be a little bit out of the loop on some of that, and that takes a little bit more effort to know what went on in that committee. And if nothing else, just go and sit there and as a person and just watch it.
Mm-hmm. Wes?
Well, Andy, I agree with both your points, but one of the things that Mr. Shores did make note of, he charged the superintendent with sending out the agenda of each committee to all board members and then sending out the notes or minutes to all board members. That would happen the agenda prior to the committee meeting. So if there was something there, a board member who was not on the safety committee, for instance, had a particular interest in, they'd know they could go, couldn't participate, but they could be there. And then they get the minutes, if they didn't attend, they would have the opportunity to talk to others on the committee or the board chair with any concerns they had about any items that might be added to the board's agenda or recommendations from committee. And I think that's going to alleviate some of what I have perceived has been a concern from some board members with a new committee structure for the last 4 years.
And that shouldn't be controversial. That should just be what you do as a courtesy to the other board members.
It certainly seems to have worked well at the college.
Yeah.
Well, and it should have been done all along, to be
Absolutely.
quite honest about it.
I don't know whether or not it was,
Yeah.
but he made a point that it will be from this point forward.
This is just my one takeaway from new Chairman Shores toward the end of the meeting that I'll add to what y'all said. I pretty much agree with what y'all have said, but I think he made a point in a very roundabout to say is that he wasn't being critical of the former chairman, Mr. Queen, but that he is not Mr. Queen. He is Mr. Shores.
Yep.
He has a little different approach. He has a different personality, and he wants to make an attempt in his way to get the board to work together. I think that's what I heard him say.
That's what I
think
heard
so,
as well.
Yeah.
Well, we wish all 9 of you who are our members of the Cleveland County Board of Education the best, and we hope you have a good year and that you will be able to work together.
Mike, you did mention that this is the last political Smackdown we're recording this year. You might want to plug, there will be shows on for the next 2 weeks. You and Andy will be doing 2 different interviews with current Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, and new member of Congress.
Yeah, at the same time next week as you normally watch the show, and the week after, there will be 2 30-minute interviews with Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, who will not be Speaker by the time the second show has aired its last time in early January. But the first show, we're going to talk to him about things that happened this year in the General Assembly, let him reflect on his 22 years of being your representative from Cleveland County. And then the second show will mostly focus on why he wanted to go to Congress, what he anticipates doing and hopes to do in Congress. Want to add anything, Andy?
Nope, that's it. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we've got about 3 minutes till break, so we can at least do a little bit of this second question. I guess a little early to go to break. The North Carolina House met on December the 11th, and they did complete the override of what's known as Senate Bill 382. It's known by the Republicans as the disaster relief bill, and it's known by the Democrats as the meddling with everything the executive branch does bill. Is that a fair statement?
That's very accurate.
And they also at that meeting approved one of 2 proposed constitutional amendments that the Senate had voted on the week before. So let's talk some about what happened, and did they get those 3 Republicans they needed to override the votes? They overrode it on a party line vote of 72 to 46 with 2 Democrats absent. So Andy, what do you make of the override and that they did override it? Now, of course, we already have a lawsuit we'll talk about briefly in a minute.
Well, I think it's very obvious that 3 Republicans got taken to the woodshed. And I think they learned the hard way. You don't run afoul of the powers that be if you want to have any kind of longevity in that place. And I think that's pretty much what happened. Now, what stick was used on them, who knows? But I'm sure it was a very big one, and it had force behind
Do
it.
you think one of them could have been offered a broom closet for his office next year
Well,
if he didn't vote with them?
Well, probably would have given them a parking space downstairs they could sit their desk in. But it was just one of those things that, and it's going to be interesting to see how the new speaker is going to react to people that, quote, run afoul of him, unquote. You know, there's always different ways that people administer that place. And, you know, sometimes I've always believed that you need to have both a carrot and a stick. And usually the carrot will get you where you need to go. So, you know, I don't know what happened. I don't know what sweetener might have been put in the pot. But they saw, they had, as we say, Mike, they had a Damascus Road experience, and they decided to come on home.
Well, we're going to go on to break and come back and finish talking about this because there are several aspects of it that are very interesting.
Killing people dying, children hurt and you hear them crying. Can you practice what you preach? And would you turn the other cheek?
How you doing, Dave Mount?
Father, help us and some guidance from above. These people got me questioning. Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love?
Greetings from the CCC Foundation. We're proud to support CCC students, faculty and staff through scholarships and support for academics, workforce training, and Yeti athletics. Thank you for your strong support in 2024. We wish you a joyous holiday and a bright new year.
Well, welcome back to Political Smackdown. Well, one of the things was in SB 382 that they did override the veto was that it removed the Highway Patrol commander from being appointed by a person that the governor appoints and made it an independent cabinet level agency, but the General Assembly is going to have appointive power instead of the governor. And already on the day after it was passed, we have a lawsuit. Roger, what is the lawsuit about, and will it make it through?
Well, to make it clear, it is called a relief bill, but as you know, the bill is 131 pages long, and 10 of those 131 pages applies to relief in Western North Carolina. All the rest of it is a power grab. And one of the power grabs is to take the commander appointment away from the governor. One of the things we saw in Uvalde, Texas, 2.5 years ago, when that shooter went into that elementary school, was it Robb Elementary, I think, and the police stood around for an hour before they took any action, was because of a lack of a chain of command. Nobody knew who was in charge with all those different agencies. And what Governor Cooper and Mr. Sine have argued in their lawsuit is that in an emergency, and that's an extreme example obviously, but in an emergency there has to be a clear chain of command to handle an emergency. And this bill taking the Highway Patrol and putting over here, and you can't dismiss the commander without authorization of the General Assembly, that just muddies the water in a crisis, is the essence of their argument, I think.
Yeah, and in effect, at least in part, West seems to move part of that from executive to legislative, which has been a big point of contention in some of these other court cases. But what are your thoughts on that?
I want to really address what Mr. Harris said. I think it's going to provide a lot of relief. This part particularly is going to provide relief, and I'll tell you how. As a cabinet level position, the Department of Public Safety will fall under the commander of the Highway Patrol, arguably the top public safety person in the state. I found it interesting just this week. An audit of the Department was released, and it said, and I quote, "Department of Public Safety did not design or implement the procedures to ensure that Hurricane Florence disaster recovery funds were spent in accordance with the same named legislation or that they achieved the intended result." That report comes out days after another report about the Department of Recovery and Resiliency, which is under DPS, where they've ordered contractors to stop building new homes for Hurricanes Florence and Matthews and stop paying the contractors. This is North Carolina government, an utter failure of the executive department to deal with hurricanes from 5 years ago. Now we've got another hurricane. Mike, I don't know if you've ever been pulled over by a state trooper.
Oh, yes.
But I tell you what, those folks know how to get things done, and it suits me fine. I think this is a good idea.
Well, Mike, when it comes to Highway Patrol, there is no more political group than the Highway Patrol. I mean, they know how they are political animals from the word go. And they're basically going back to kind of the way they were before. They weren't cabinet level, but they were pretty much a standalone thing. And the governor appointed the colonel. And that's the way it has been that way ever since. And it's always interesting to watch. Whenever you get some of these high-ranking folks in the state, you better believe there's going to be one or two Highway Patrol lurking around in the corner somewhere. They know what side their toast is buttered on, and that's why they always come out in pretty good shape on budget times.
And if you had House 46 on your tag, did that help you going down I-40 to Raleigh?
Well, let's just say one time I got pulled over right in Greensboro, they call Death Valley, where 85 and 40 come along. And a young man, he must have been just right out of rookie school. And he pulled over and he got out of his car and he looked, I saw him drop his head, he saw that tag. And he walked around passenger side and said, "Representative Devin, you're going a little fast. Do you mind slowing down a little bit?" And I said, "Yes, sir, officer, I'll be more than glad to do it." Then he kind of looked around. He said, "How much raise are we getting this year?" And I said, "It's just now looking better and better."
I thought you might tell that story. I sort of prodded you on, didn't it? Anything else in that override that y'all want to talk about you think's particularly good or particularly bad? If not, we're going to move to those constitutional amendments.
I will just say, we've spent the last 6 months hearing about, we've got to save democracy. Democracy is as close to the people as you can get making decisions. To take authority away from the executive branch, move it to the legislative branch, democratizes these decisions.
Part of a democratic republic is a balance of power. You know, we all learned that in 8th grade civics, that there's 3 branches of government. And if you continually rob from one branch and make one branch stronger, then where's the checks and balances?
And that was
You know,
always my problem about the veto. At that point, the governor had some of the biggest appointed powers of probably any other governor in the country. And I was always concerned about that, but now we're going the other way around. And and you know, we're going to get out of whack somewhere, fellas. And somewhere, because everybody needs to have a check and balance on each other.
Well, I think the most interesting thing that's going to play out, I'm sure, in the courts is transferring the Board of Election appointments to the state auditor instead of the governor, because it has a new twist. The state auditor's text is a part of the council of state and a part of the executive branch. And a big part of the argument when the legislature was going to appoint them was you were taking it into the legislature. And you were taking executive authority in an unconstitutional manner away. I wonder what the argument will be to change it from the governor to another part of the executive branch. I think that's going to be a fascinating court case to watch, and I do anticipate a court case.
I do as well, and I think the argument is going to be, is there a difference taking it away from the chief executive and giving it to any executive? Is that justifiable?
Well, and does it actually fit his wheelhouse? I mean, the auditor's supposed to be looking after our money. I mean, does he actually have to be, how does that work being in charge of elections, you know? And the governor is more of a catch-all for all that kind of stuff.
What better than a numbers person to count?
It depends on who's counting.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some more time to discuss that because I know that's going to make a court. I just am sure that's going to be a court case. Before we move on to our next topic, real quickly, there were 2 constitutional amendments the Senate approved to put on the budget. It takes a 3/5 majority of all present, of the whole body on that, to put it on the ballot for the people to put it in the Constitution. They had that in the Senate on 2 bills. One was on requiring voter ID for mail-in ballots, which would just make the Constitution the same as state law. The House did put that one on the ballot. But the other one, that's one we'll talk about, the Senate wanted to lower the maximum tax rate on income to 5%. It's currently 7%. When the Republicans took the legislature, it was 10%, and it was by the people voted to 7% a few years ago. The House did not take that up. So Wes, we're sort of back to you. Why did the House not take that up?
Votes weren't there.
Simple enough.
And Andy, how many votes do they have that they don't know how the votes are going to go?
None.
In other words, they'd have had to have 72 Republicans, or at least 72 members of the body to vote for it to put it on the ballot. The governor can't veto a constitutional amendment.
Right.
But, so obviously they didn't have. Wonder why, Andy, in the House, they want the income tax to stay at 7% more than they did in the Senate.
Well, my thing is, I think they felt like that was hamstringing future General Assemblies a little bit more as far as budgetary items. If they think that they need to drop it down to 5%, they can do that anytime they really want to and change the tax rate.
Well, it's under 5% now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they didn't have any issues about it. To me, the point was moved.
It's at
They've
4.
they've got the authority to do it. All they got to do is just do it.
It's at 4.5% on individuals and 2.5% on corporations, I believe, in North Carolina today.
Well, they can lower it down to 0 if they want to, if they can figure out how to pay for stuff.
Well, Roger, I think it's pretty clear. Berger in the Senate a few years ago wanted to do away with all income tax and put it on consumption.
Yeah.
And the House wouldn't go along. I think there's some people or Republicans in the House that must say there needs to be some of both.
Well, at some point, you got to pay the bills. And there's no doubt in my mind that if you put a constitutional amendment out there to do away with all taxes, it would pass in North Carolina.
Oh, overwhelmingly.
Folks will vote that. But the reality is, you got to pay for the schools, you got to pay for the roads, and you got to pay, there's expenses of government. And at some point, the grown-ups have to take charge and say, no, we've got to have some taxes to provide the services of government.
But it works pretty well in Florida and Tennessee and places like that that have no income tax.
But you got to tax somewhere else.
You got to get it somewhere. They don't have it in Texas, but on the same value of a house, property tax on my daughter's house is about 4 or 5 times what it would be in Cleveland County.
But a tax is a disincentive. Why would we disincentivize making money?
But can you imagine what Walmart and all these big retailers will do if you jack that sales up about 50%? I mean, can you imagine what that would do as far as curtailing people going to the store and spending money?
And reducing the size of government because people would understand the cost of government.
All right, if we're going to talk at all about this next question before we go to the lightning round, let's just briefly talk about it. It appears from all that happened this week that the state Supreme Court race will be won by the Democrat Allison Riggs by 700 and something votes after a full numbers recount by the machines and a 3% recount of selected districts around the state. There won't be a hand recount. There's still a lawsuit possibility, but it looks like on a 3-2 party line vote, it looks to me like it's very unlikely and that the Republican, Mr. what's his name? Griffin will be able to overcome that 700 votes. You think it's over, or are we still going to get a lawsuit and it could still change?
I hope it's over. You know, at some point, you just got to say, I've lost the ball game. It was close, and I almost made it, but I lost the ball game.
Quickly, Andy.
Oh, absolutely, because there's no way 60,000 votes he was contesting were that bad. If it was that bad, we've got more problems than we thought.
Well, there were 60,000 identified that didn't meet one requirement, which is either the last 4 digits of your Social Security or of your license number as ID. They didn't have them. 22% were Republican. That's what he was challenging.
Yeah, I think it's over. I think it should be over. Time to stop.
All right, let's go to the lightning round. Mr. Harris.
At a Middle Eastern conference this week, Donald Trump's son Eric said that Mr. Trump is going to be the most pro-crypto president in history. Now, just in case you don't know, Bitcoin is a digital currency designed to act as money. New Bitcoin virtual currency is generated by computers solving math problems called mining. Bitcoin was introduced in 2008 by an anonymous developer, and it's part of a public blockchain. And as you know, Bitcoin rewards are halved every 210,000 blocks on the blockchain. And I don't have the slightest idea of any of that crap I just said.
All I know is if you'd have bought $1,000 worth of 2008, you'd be a rich man.
That's it. Well, I want to talk about our good friend, Mr. Philbeck. He got a wonderful award this week. He was selected as Realtor of the Year by the Cleveland County Association of Realtors, and it was well earned. So,
right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Mike.
Well, thank you, Andy.
Good, congratulations. Well, America is a republic, if only technically so today, and the republic shows off on Tuesday, December 17th, as the presidential electors, the people we actually voted for on November 5th, meet in all 50 states to cast their ballots. January 6th, those votes will be read and counted before a joint session of Congress, and then on and at that point, we'll have a president-elect in technical terms. Then on January 20th, the president and vice president chosen by the Electoral College, not by the popular vote, will be sworn into office. The process is just fascinating and I think inherently good.
Well, I want to talk about one of our few Republican governors in North Carolina in modern times, and the only one to serve 2 terms, Jim Martin, or James G. Martin. He served as governor of North Carolina from 1985 until 1993. He was first elected to Congress in 1972. Before that, he is the first Republican chairman of a county commission in Mecklenburg County and was the first Republican to chair the North Carolina Association. He's done a lot of firsts as a Republican, and to this day, he remains the only Republican to be elected to 2 terms as governor of North Carolina. On December the 11th, Mr. Martin turned 89. Congratulations, Governor Martin. Wish you more years of good health. Come back and join us again next week for Political Smackdown.